economically, because we literally have women who sell their kidneys so their children don't go hungry. And I talked to that woman, what do you want? She doesn't say money. She says, I want my freedom at the top of everything because I want to work. I want to have the ability to work and bring food to my family, my children. But really, it's hard, it's frustrating, ladies and gentlemen, to see that this will happen to my daughter as well, as it happened to me, it happened to my mother, it happened to my grandma. We saw a lot of regime changes in the country that really underestimated our ability to be part of the society. Let me also go to the some narratives that Taliban also have these days, that the narrative is that bring us a small demands, don't bring big demands, give us time, we need consensus, international community has to have the consensus among themselves. So they are buying time to systematically form the system to suppress people of Afghanistan. And this is really hard to see that Taliban that do not represent the diversity and they do not represent the dignity of people of Afghanistan are there, and the international community just watches. They put statements of solidarity, they have some advocacy, but no country is so far pushed to put advocacy into action and change the situation for the better on the ground for women of Afghanistan. What is scary? It is that there is no tool, no measure, and no system to hold Taliban accountable. And this fall of Afghanistan and the Taliban, this withdrawal that was unconditional, this Doha agreement that was unconditionalized, put a hot potato in the hand of international community that they don't know what to do with it. But I want to give you warnings that if you keep quiet and if you think Taliban can be an ally, if you think Taliban can be influenced, it's wrong. It's wrong because Taliban right now are in close tie with the most dangerous terrorist groups in the world. They will make Afghanistan a terrorist hub that is dangerous for the people of Afghanistan, for the region, and for the world. The fact that Ayman al-Zawahiri was killed in downtown Kabul gives the clearance that Taliban are playing this double game. At the same time, they give green light to the international community that they will collaborate in terms of counter-terrorism measures, but at the same time, they are in collaboration with the most dangerous groups, terrorist groups. And also they are in ties with the most dangerous authoritarian regimes that we have. Like we have their ties with China, with Russia, with Iranian regime that they reopened Taliban's consulate and also embassy in Tehran. The first economic move of the Taliban was with Russia, with oil trade, the oil extraction deal that Taliban had with China. They all give you the sentiment that Taliban have ties with authoritarian regimes, and authoritarian regimes see Taliban as an ally. And this is a threat to all democracies of the world, for the vibrancy, for the well-being of the democracies all over the world, we have to highlight the fact that the people of Afghanistan need democracy. They don't need Taliban. Taliban also have money. Some assumption is that Taliban need money, Taliban need legitimacy. So these are two demands of the Taliban. We can influence Taliban to do this. When we give them money, we can ask them to reopen the schools. When we start engagement with them, we can ask them to do things that proven to be wrong, because in the last 18 months, Taliban gave so little and gained a lot with every engagement that they had with international community, especially with the United States. And they have money inside of the country. I'm coming from Herat. It has one of the biggest custom of the Afghanistan, for a country that is relying on the import of goods. A lot of money, almost $800 million a year just comes from that port of entry in Herat. So they have money, they have no accountability, even they don't give that information to their own people where that money goes, but it doesn't go to the people of Afghanistan because Taliban are foreign insurgents. They don't have the expertise to do the good governance, to bring development, to think of the change and agenda, having any agenda of the change. So this group has no agenda to bring change to the situation of the people of Afghanistan. Stop me when you think it is time, Mr. Alok, but I want to continue with one more very interesting fact that other terrorist groups, when Doha Agreement happened in 2020, already started to think that Taliban can be a role model for them. So they learn from them. If they continue, if they continue to take power by violence, by force, they will get up the attention of Americans, and a country like US will sideline a government like Afghanistan, will sit down directly with the Taliban and will sign an agreement, and the territory will be given to them. So many groups in Central Asia, in Middle East, are copying the same path that Taliban have been followed in the last 20 years. Right now, similarly, groups like Houthis in Yemen, Boko Haram in North Africa, they copy Taliban's edict against women. We see they ask women not to study beyond 6th grade, not to get out without male chaperones. These are very dangerous for women all over the world. I think what happened in Afghanistan can happen everywhere in the world. A group of extremists, a group of Islamic
discussion. अरे ये उससे अफगानिस्तान 3 मिनट की बोल रही है स्पीकर को ये कैसे बंद थोड़ी देर के बाद अरे पावर की आवाज पेट्रोल की कार से टेंशन चाहिए नहीं बंद हुई
पर Miss Usha, can I ask you to mute?
Yeah, I think she's muted. Nahid, you may continue, please. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to wrap up. So this is very alarming, ultimate factor of the fact that unfortunately other terrorist groups are going to rise and do the same, suppress women, and Taliban see their future in a radicalized nation. That's why they suppress women, because an educated mother won't let her child to become a Taliban soldier. So this is the reality, unfortunately, that radicalized Afghanistan will be the future when we see Taliban doing all this. And the movement of the women of Afghanistan have been so scattered. So we have different groups, different people, the different ideology. But from my point of view, we have two groups right now. One group is a movement that they want the policies to be changed. They want to be engaged with the Taliban. They want to go to talk with the Taliban. And they also have another group who is having revolutionary ideas that Taliban cannot be there. We cannot count on them. We cannot keep their promises. Do not engage with them. Do not give them legitimacy. Do not give them the recognition for engaging with them. So these are two narratives that we have amongst women and also men who resist the Taliban. But we also have some groups inside of the country their fight here and there against the Taliban. And also, I want to simplify the discrimination against women of Afghanistan under the Taliban. It's okay for a woman to go begging in the street, to go and ask money from men. Woman will ask, where is your husband? Where is your brother?
Yashodan, can you please mute Usha ji? Her mic is continuously on. I have done it, sir.
Okay, it's okay for a woman under the Taliban who go outside and begging. They don't ask where is your husband, where is your brother. But it's not okay if she goes out to university. It's not okay if she goes out to work. They will stop her and they will ask her. And we see women who continuously had this discrimination and they continue to work. A woman that I talked to her a few days ago, she said, I went to the bank to collect my salary and they said, where's your husband? And I said, I have no husband. And she continuously going to the bank and she couldn't receive her salary because she's not married and she has no brother. She's living with her mom. But she continues to work. And when I ask these women what are the demands, they don't say that this is the demand of me or the man. They demand the full spectrum of rights of the society: freedom of media, freedom of access to information, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and all these freedoms that are essential for a vibrant, for a democratic and free society. So what's the way forward? I think appeasement is not the viable strategy towards the Taliban. Giving them time will give them more resources, will give them more power to get more empowered and use that against people, against their enemies. And they are known as a group in the last 20 years that they have not been able to keep their promises. They also have different groups among the Taliban. The Haqqani group, those who are in Doha, those who are in Kandahar. So this is also something, another dilemma that adds its complexity. I also wanted to highlight one more issue, which is also important for the audience here. That is, the Western world think this became their thought these days, that radical Islamism is something that is inevitable in Afghanistan. We may bring modern system, but again, radical Islamism will definitely remove that because that's the dominant discourse of Afghanistan. It comes to two different phases of Mujahideen, of Taliban, first time, Taliban second time, and we cannot ignore that. And let's work with that. And this is wrong. This is wrong because Afghan people proved in the last 20 years that they deserve to live in freedom. They embraced the freedom. They went voting to their leaders. They participated in almost every political processes. to show to the world that they deserve to live in democratic society. Their voice is their voice matters and has to be counted in the policy making. So this is something that we have to make sure that what happened in the August 2021 was the outcome of a flawed, a wrong policy, not the failure of democracy. It was not the failure of democracy. People of Afghanistan showed to the world, showed to the policymakers, showed to the region, showed to the Iranians that they didn't really like that democratic exercise that we had, that they deserve to live in dignity, they deserve to live in liberty, they deserve to live in democracy and freedom. And we have to acknowledge that they still want that. They try to say that, send that message through different mediums, social media, protests, writing down articles. Although under that situation, that they will definitely get arrested or disappear, they continue to resist that. So Taliban are dangerous. Appeasement is not a viable strategy with them. Women and people of Afghanistan need you at this greatest time of the need of the people of Afghanistan. India is the greatest democracy of the world. We need our allies. That India have been our ally in this last 20 years, and we really need you to stop Taliban from this gender apartheid and terrorizing women. Taliban are part of the reality. We cannot ignore that, but they are not all of the reality. All of the reality of Afghanistan are 70% of youth, 50% of women, a great number of minorities that we have in Afghanistan that showed their coexistence, showed their ability to live together, and we have to be innovative with solutions, think beyond the box, get out of this traditional way of thinking. I think even in the policies, we have to influence the policy, start the community engagement, have some team going on the ground, talk to the people, and extract data from the people. Based on that data, you can definitely write down a policy towards Afghanistan that can help the people of Afghanistan have the government they deserve, have the government they want to represent, their dignity, their coexistence, their vibrancy, and their liberty. I want to stop here. If there was any other question, I will be delighted to come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Nahid. We'll take the questions at the end. Unfortunately, Dr. Ayesha Siddiqa has not been able to join us for certain unavoidable reasons. So I'll try and fill in for her for some time. And the topic that we had given to her was Pakistan and Taliban under Afghanistan. And as Ambassador Sinha rightly brought out, that when Taliban captured power on 15th August, one of the countries that was euphoric was Pakistan. They thought they had actually achieved a big victory. Not over Afghanistan or not over the government of Ashraf Ghani. They thought it was a victory over India. And that's what actually Imran Khan, their prime minister at that point of time, tweeted. Unfortunately, they have realized that it's not all hunky-dory because Taliban are no longer following their diktats. And this actually points to certain facts which we need to ponder over. We need to understand that Taliban is an ideological entity, and it will be governed by its ideology. It will not go by what, if you reach out to them, if you give them some courses and reach out, open some embassies or something. Because you can see even those countries which have supported Taliban to come to power have not been helped by it. Taliban has to date not handed over one radical militant, either belonging to China or Pakistan, to these countries which was aligned with Taliban. Neither a single TTP militant has been handed over to Pakistan, nor an ETIM militant has been handed over to Sinha. So we need to understand what the ideology of Taliban is. And Taliban has remained aligned with Al-Qaeda. And that is very clearly evident when Ayman al-Zawahiri was killed from Kabul. Very often the Western audience tend to forget that Al-Qaeda has always talked of waging a global jihad under Amirul Mu'minin, who happens to be the leader of Taliban, not under Osama bin Laden or Ayman al-Zawahiri or whoever is the Al-Qaeda leader. Now, this fact we need to understand, because if Taliban actually transforms, then the whole jihad of Al-Qaeda becomes illegitimate. The second factor which people who think that Taliban will mellow down with passage of time need to understand, that Taliban have come to power propagating a particular ideology. And if they make compromises with it, there is a contender for them. You have Islamic State in Afghanistan. So if the foot soldiers realize that tomorrow Taliban is actually changing its ideology, they'll go and join Islamic State. So whether we like it or not, Taliban is unlikely to change. It may make some tactical alliances with you, may say that they have no ambitions outside the frontiers of Afghanistan, but it is an ideological beast which has, and whose ultimate objective is establishment of a global Islamic Emirat, and that we need to understand. So eventually this influence will spread. We are already seeing from Afghanistan the influences going into Pakistan. Pakistan is facing the brunt of what's happening in Afghanistan. All sorts of terrorists, either from Pakistan, China, have taken shelter in Afghanistan. And here we need to remember that most of the radical outfits which are active in India also have their bases in Afghanistan. We already have clear-cut indications that outfits like Lashkar-e-Toiba, etc., have been provided training facilities. So we need to look at it from India's point of view, and as I have always said, the Taliban's presence in Afghanistan poses four major threats to India and Indian interests. First is that Taliban in power gives an impression to any non-state actor or any insurgent that if Taliban can defeat the United States and its massive army, we can also do so to any other army. So every insurgent in the region and across the globe has actually got bolstered by this so-called success of Taliban. The second factor which we need to understand is that jihad has certain theological requirements, and one of them is that you need to control a certain territory. Now, with this capturing of power in Afghanistan, the global jihad has got a theological legitimacy, because now there is a territory which is under Amirul Mu'minin, that is Afghanistan. So this gives them a theological legitimacy, and as a result, jihadis all over the world will get certain amount of boost. The third factor which we need to understand is that Taliban is committed to an ideology which is actually radical Islamist, which talks in terms of spreading this ideology. So eventually, from Afghanistan, once they consolidate, they'll move into other parts of the world, which will again come to Pakistan and Afghanistan. And finally, we need to understand that hypothetically Afghanistan peace was to descend to Afghanistan, these foot soldiers of Taliban who have been fighting for decades will not start plowing the land. They only know one profession, that is to fight and use the guns. So they will eventually move to another battlefield in search of new battlefields, and those battlefields could well be inside India or on our frontiers. So that we need to be cognizant of, because many in India today are euphoric that Taliban is not following the Pakistani line, and there is actually a conflict between Pakistan and Taliban. It does give us a tactical advantage at this point of time, but that does not justify any long-term relationship with Taliban, which to my mind remain an immoral entity and will remain so. We also need to be very cognizant of the fact that a majority of Afghans are opposed to Taliban. They may have captured power because of American connivance or because of connivance of certain external powers, but majority of Afghanistan remains opposed to Taliban. This includes almost 50% of the population of Afghanistan, which comprises of women, a large chunk of sectarian minorities, and even a large number of Sunni Pakhtuns who are opposed to this sort of a puritanical version of Islam which Taliban wishes to impose on the population there. So this is what we need to understand, and taking cognizance of this and seeing with the way they are dealing with those who were their benefactors till the other day, we need to be careful. We not only need to be careful, I think the global community should strategize and come out with a roadmap for removing Taliban from the power of Afghanistan. Because eventually what we want and what is in India's interest is that Afghans and Indians have had centuries of interaction, and all of India is one of the most popular country in Afghanistan. If you actually were to ask Afghans, an average Afghan, which is the country they would like to visit or which is the country most friendly country, many polls have indicated that India has always ranked amongst the first. So for that sort of a situation, I think we need to come up with a strategy. While it may be necessary to engage with Taliban, have a tactical alliance with them, probably for some short-term gains. But long-term, we need to come out with a strategy that Taliban is rid from Afghanistan and a secular democratic government is established in Afghanistan. That should be the aim. And this is just purely my personal view. And with that, since Ayesha was not here, we will take on any questions. If you have anything, if anybody has a comment, you may raise hands. There is an option in Zoom of raise hands, or you can probably post it onto the chat box. Yash wants to make some housekeeping announcement, and thereafter you can raise hands or post your questions onto the chat box. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Alok. Please, everybody, when somebody is asking the question, please mute yourself, and also don't forget to add your name, because considering the nature of the topic, we would like to have all the participants. We can start with the question and answer session. We have past member of parliament from Karnataka and current member of Legislative Assembly, Dr. Tejaswini ji, a good friend of our organization. Dr. Tejaswini ji, please go ahead with your question or comment.
Yes, namaste, sir. It's a wonderful opportunity, and also from day one, the day when Taliban is took over, ended the democracy in Afghanistan. Our Alok sir, our Ashutosh Bhattanagar sir, we are all very much worried, like particularly for our women folk in Afghanistan. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, we can hear you well, Tejaswini ji. Please go ahead.
Okay, sir. And I'm very proud the moment Afghanistan women were thinking that India is the greatest democracy which can come to their help. This is we are really, I feel very proud, and it is our moral duty to protect them. At least we are in a position to give them some hopes, And second thing, historically and politically, from civilization-wise, we are very much connected. Our roots for our umbilical cord was connected with Afghanistan. As a woman, always I do feel, and every moment I do feel their pain and their agonism. So it is our every moment it is our moral duty to think about bringing back democracy in Afghanistan. Of course, it's my dream. It must happen. It must happen. And I'm very much worried when Alok sir was also throwing light on what is happening with our neighbors, Pakistan, how they celebrated, how they enjoyed when Taliban took over Afghanistan. And they were very much neglected, they were very much forgotten. What Hillary Clinton said, that the snake is in their backyard only, it will bite them also. Now we are seeing those things. Sir, in as far as Western powers, as far as United Nations is concerned, I think India must utilize every forum to raise the concern for Afghanistan, how to bring the order, particularly to check this human rights violation, how to protect, because from last 2 decades, Afghanistan experienced the development, the other kind of democratic whatever the values there, because of India also spent lot of resources, and also we shown how one can develop together. So now all of a sudden They have lost everything, their freedom, their opportunity to participate in their nation's development, their talent. All of a sudden, they became like a prisoners in their own country. And we must do everything possible under this roof of the world to bring back democracy once again in Afghanistan. And we must, it is not impossible task, sir, for Talibanis, because after all, Taliban is also sons or brothers of one woman. Women is not a weaker sex. Women is no more a commodity where they can exploit and they can put them to violence and atrocities. So it is the time India must play a major role and bold step in every possible forum to protect the human rights and dignity of Afghanistan women, sir. And we are all proud to participate in this role, whatever role our forums are going to give us. We are with them. We are with them every moment in their cycle. In their psyche, they must think India will never betray them. India will never let them, to lose their morale. So that much I can say, sir.
Thank you very much, Tejaswini ji. We really appreciate your remarks. Ashok Sharma ji has his hand. Ashok ji, please go ahead with your question. Ashok Sharma ji, please unmute yourself and go ahead with your question.
Okay, sir. Just I am telling that there is no video of the ma'am.
Okay, no, that's okay. Ashok ji, please go ahead. Please be precise and ask your question, sir.
No, sir, I have not to raise the question, but I am telling you that there is no video.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I think there are some questions in the chat box. We can see some Mr. Rahul Tiwari. You can ask your question followed by Amrita ji. I think there are two questions I can see. So Rahul Tiwari ji, if you are there, you can unmute yourself and ask a question if you have any. Otherwise, Amrita ji can go ahead.
Ji, Alok ji, Ayesha ji, namaste. I have a question that are there any possible implications on India-Afghanistan relations? Afghanistan, which is currently being run by Taliban, that due to the ongoing Ukraine-Russia war, I mean, are there any possible implications on India-Afghanistan relations due to the ongoing Ukraine-Russia war and the stand that India has taken in the UN? And if there are some implications, then what are those? This is the question from my side to Alok ji and Nitesh. Namaste.
I don't think so. There is a direct implications of anything of Russia-Ukraine war on this particular issue because Russia-Ukraine war, India has taken a very principled stand. We have a neutral stance on this particular war. We have, of course, criticized the war. We have taken some steps to end the conflict. But because of these conflicts, maybe that India has not been able to take as strong a stance against Taliban as it would have probably taken up. But I don't think so. There is a significant impact of the war on Afghanistan. Amrita ji, now you could probably ask your question.
Thank you, sir. I hope I'm audible. Nahid, I am really moved by whatever you said, and this line of yours has actually touched my heart that Afghan people, they deserve democratic society, their voices matter and should be counted in policy making. And in this context, I have put my question in the chat box that what kind of roadmap, as Alok sir also said, that you suggest from ground, from that is expected from the global community. Thank you.
Naveen, you would like to
Yes.
answer?
Okay. Thank you so much. I think all interventions were great, and thank you. It's also very encouraging to see my friends from India who have Afghanistan in their thoughts and have this program. I think this is something that I really admire from the bottom of my heart. the fall of Afghanistan, the Taliban brought us to the situation that we have a government on the ground that has no nation. And we also have a nation that has no government. All ties that a government could have with a nation have been vanished. All ties that a nation has to have with the government also vanished. The only thing that we have right now is authoritarian regime of the Taliban against people and also collecting money, collecting revenue, collecting different taxes, high taxes, increased taxes from the people. So they are doing this and they are busy doing this. How different groups can help from India, I think, depends on the nature of the activities and meetup. If it is a civil society organization who wants to work, please don't go to the Ministry of Economy of the Taliban, because they have their own recommendations and they will have their own civil society organization to be helped. You already have a very long list of civil society organizations before the fall of Afghanistan, during the Republic, that have been the ally of Indian government, and many of them still are in the country. They need you, because I think at least giving some salary to those who are working, or giving a small consultation project to them, few $1,000 matters a lot for those organizations. Recognize the political crisis of Afghanistan, because I think this is something that we have to acknowledge, that Afghanistan is in a crisis politically, and this is the starting point from a policy standpoint to prevent the never-ending humanitarian crisis, because otherwise this will continue. I think this political crisis of Afghanistan, resources has to be divided among all the people of the country through the constitution of the country, has to be under the consideration of any reconciliation engagement in the future of Afghanistan. The human rights situation is very dire. We all know how hard it is. Documenting those humanitarian human rights crises, authenticating them, reflecting them are very important. I say something happened in Herat, in my constituency. There is no organization to say, yes, that happened on the ground. So there is no measure in the country to authenticate the human rights crisis and human rights violation of the Taliban. We need that. And I'm really asking any organization who can help in that regard, because we have to document all these atrocities that Taliban committed against the people of Afghanistan. Another issue is that although we see, for example, Taliban failed their allies, including the Pakistan, the long-term ally of the Taliban, but still, when there is a voting in the Security Council, in the United Nations, we see how Pakistan continuously supports the Taliban. Pakistan, China, Russia, Iran, all are in favor of the Taliban these days. They are pushing to remove their travel ban, they are pushing to remove their sanction, they are pushing to send the reserve of Afghanistan Central Bank to Afghanistan. And these are the issues that we have to keep in mind, that the global platforms are also in solidarity with the Taliban. And we have to have our counter narrative. We have to have India come out and say, hey, world, this is the reality on the ground. We are here to tell you the reality, the problem that people of Afghanistan are experiencing. In that platform, we need India. And India have been hesitant so far, unfortunately, in this international platform, which is very surprising for me as a very long-term ally and friend of my friends in India that supported this freedom in Afghanistan in the best way, not just in a symbolic way. with helping education, with helping building schools, with helping building dams, with helping infrastructures of Afghanistan. These are meaningful support of India to the people of Afghanistan that has to be preserved, has to be continued at this greatest simultaneous. I also wanted to highlight the fact that this assurance that Taliban have. The Taliban are assured that there is no alternative. The world see no alternative to the Taliban. Taliban are the future, are the only reality, are the only group that can be counted on as a government for the future. U.S. signed the agreement, the Doha agreement with them. They took power. They have the territory. They have this system, and they exercise that, use that system against the people of Afghanistan, use the information from different entities inside of the country against the people, the former Afghan National Security Forces, former human rights journalists, all of this. So this is something that we have to consider. The only
We'll take some more questions and come to you again, if you allow me. We have a paucity of time, so we have about 4 questions. Mr. Vinay Rao, Shri Praful Ketkar ji, Sant Kumar Sharma ji, and Dr. Amit Tripathi. You may ask the questions, and then we'll request Nahid and Ambassador Amar Sinha to respond to your questions, and we'll wind it up. So we have a paucity of time. We'll need to request you to make pointed comments or questions. Over to you, Vinay Kumar ji.
Good evening, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible.
Yeah. It's my concern that nobody is caring about the rich ancient heritage of Afghanistan. And we are always talking about human rights violation and this women condition, but nobody talks about this heritage.
Okay, thank you. Praful ji, please.
Thank you, Alok ji. My first question is to Ambassador Sinha. Sir, recently India has helped out with supply of wheat to Afghanistan. It is seen as more as a humanitarian thing. So, but there have been people within India who are criticizing this move. So, how do you see this in policy terms? Because we have been saying that we stand by Afghan people, but ultimately it is the Taliban regime who is going to handle this, and perhaps Nahid also can comment on this. Initially, Nahid, there were certain UN agencies who were involved in most of humanitarian things. What is the situation on ground? What are the things that you are getting? And Alok, if you can comment on how far this regime is, how far OIC countries are responding to Afghanistan regime. Initially, we have seen there was a sense of jubilation in many of the OIC countries, especially the radical elements within them. So, how do you see their role in handling Afghanistan? Thank you.
Thank you, Praful ji. We have Sant Kumar ji and then followed by Dr. Amit. Please.
My question is for Nahid. I have written it down. Many capacity building projects are going on in Afghanistan with the help of Indian government. One of them was regarding water of Kabul River being made available to about 2 million Afghans, about 20 lakhs, by constructing dams and other allied structures. What to do about this project? What does India do about this project? Just abandon it or do anything? Thank you.
Dr. Amit.
Namaskar everyone. Myself Dr. Amit Tripathi. I wanted to ask a question to Dr. Alok ji. We are investing huge amount in Afghanistan, and scenario is changing very fast in over there. So I wanted to ask, is that going to prove fruitful for us, for Indians, or we will face jihad one or in another form, and all the investment or all the goodwill will prove fruitless in the end, at the last. So please verify.
Yeah, thank you. We'll now ask the panelists to respond. Ambassador Amar Sinha first.
Thank you very much. And as I told you, I had to also leave at 9. So just one comment. You know what dear friend Nahid said, that women who are not married are finding it very difficult. And it is really ironic because the Taliban has killed most of the male members in every household. So obviously this is a legacy issue, and that is now being used as a reason for necessarily forcing them to marry into Taliban soldiers. Somebody also asked about the implications of UK-Russia war. But of course, there is no direct implication for India. However, what is worrying for me is that if either side in this war, and both are running short of manpower, look at using trained military manpower from Afghanistan, whether, as you have heard reports about, whether people of Hikmatyar on one side, or the militias that Iranians had used in Syria, then it will have very serious implications, because we will have even more war-hardened criminals and fighters coming back in the region. So we have to be mindful of that either side, whether Ukraine or Russia, does not start dipping into the pool of trained manpower in Afghanistan. Somebody asked about the ancient heritage of Afghanistan and diversity. Obviously, we expect the Taliban would respect any diversity or ancient heritage. Is we're fooling ourselves. I'm sure you remember the blowing of the Bamiyan Buddhas. That, of course, was non-Islamic. But the fact is that their interpretation of Islam has no place even for different shades of Islam or Sufi Islams or the shrines and the tombs. So to expect that they will respect anything of their heritage is befooling ourselves, because a lot of the ancient heritage of Afghanistan, unfortunately, is non-Islamic. It is either Persian or Buddhist or Hindu. And now I think this will be anathema for Taliban regime to accept that. The supply of wheat, of course, it is a humanitarian assistance given to, and I'm sure it's not only the Taliban regime or the officials who will eat up all the wheat. We have sent, this is the third tranche which is going. Well, sometimes I think in India, the government gets criticized for even good things that it does. You remember how when we sent the vaccines out, there was a huge hue and cry, and people were claiming that why aren't you selling, vaccinating people here? Why are you selling? See, part of international relations is, and part of our philosophy is, that you share what you have. It is not only that you share when you have the surplus, and that is a huge different debate. I won't get into it. On the water project, I think that is very critical, and India should continue. If the security situation is assured, I am sure we should go ahead with that Kabul River project for a supply of water to Taliban. Because remember that of the 33 or 35 million people, Taliban is what? 100,000 people. Who were the fighting force? There would be many more sympathizers, but there are 30 million, 35 million Afghans who are hapless Afghans who have no recourse. So we can't just shun them. On women, I think because of this ITEC online program, and I have publicly stated this before, that India should use its educational EdTech facilities and actually offer to Taliban and insist that we provide education for women. Because that, I'm sure, will not offend their interpretation of the Sharia. Let us see whether we can do that. If they can participate in online ITEC programs, women can, because they have access to internet, they can also keep education. Because ultimately, because that will test the Taliban's antipathy against education or against intermingling of women coming out of the home. So we need to keep suggesting them good ideas and see what are the limits of the Taliban regime itself. So thank you very much, and unfortunately I have to run. Mr. Alok Bansal, so I apologize.
Sure, sir. Over to Nahid now. Nahid, please go ahead. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ambassador Sinha, for taking time out from your busy schedule. Nahid.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Wonderful questions have been raised. On the issue of project, the water river of Kabul, I think I'm not sure what kind of project is that. Is it off budget? Is it on budget? Is it through the government of India? Is there any element of the government on the ground involved or not? Because if it goes to the government, it empowers the Taliban, and they will have their own way of empowering their own people. Their own soldiers. But if it goes through the government, so the government of India is the decision maker, and people of Afghanistan can benefit from that, I think it should be continued. On the issue of United Nations agencies, different agencies, the only agencies that are on the ground are the United Nations, different agencies like UNDP, UN Women, OCHA, UNAMA, that their mandate has been rolled over for another year yesterday in United Nations. And they continue to work in Afghanistan. But the mandate, although the mandate is very strong and it has different elements, and has part of it is humanitarian, part of it is human rights, part of it political engagement and things like that. But all agencies of United Nations announced to put forward the life-saving humanitarian aid to Afghanistan in the coming 6 months, because they think that poverty and hunger is something that has to be tackled in Afghanistan. But I disagree with that. I think all UN agencies have to help the people of Afghanistan raise their voice. All the human rights violation has to be highlighted. The reports has to be given to the world. And this humanitarian aid that goes to Afghanistan should not go through the Taliban, because we know what kind of regime we face. The humanitarian aid has to go to the international agencies with benchmarks, with conditionalities, that this goes to the people, it goes to children of Afghanistan according to the information and demography of the people of Afghanistan, not through the Taliban, because it will empower them. On the national heritages, I echo my friend, you're right, any form of civilization that represents a modern society is something that is targeted by the Taliban. It has been in the history, it will be in the history, it remain in the history that what kind of people they have been, and also it also remained in the history who resisted them, who were against them, who did not let them do that, who raised their voice against them, what country supported them, what country stood against them. I think this is also nowadays digital world. History remains in the minds of people forever. How people of Afghanistan have been abandoned, how they have been betrayed, how they have been forgotten, and how they continue to resist.
Thank you, Nahid. I think any more? I think there were some comments addressed to me as to how strong is the regime, what could India do. I can only say that this is a myth, that there is no substitute to Taliban. Unfortunately, at this point of time, there is no viable alternative, because the groups are filtered away. external powers are not allowing them to come together because the groups that have actually taken shelter in Uzbekistan are not being allowed to come together with the groups that have taken shelter in Tajikistan. There are leaders who are in Turkey. There are, of course, Pakistan has its own agenda. I think what external powers need to do is to bring these groups together and create an alternative government or something for Afghanistan, and then things can go. What should India do? To my mind, we should in no way do anything that legitimizes Taliban. Whatever aid has to be given to Afghan people could be routed through UN agencies or things like that, so that people who are suffering can directly be helped. Women can be provided online education facilities or through distant learning capsules or some things like that, without in any way involving Taliban regime or Taliban government into that. That is what is my personal view. And now, before we wind up, I'll request the chairman of Asian Eurasian Human Rights Forum, AHRF, Professor K.N. Pandita, to make his concluding remarks. And thereafter, over to Yashoda.
Thank you, my friend Bansal. First of all, I must thank our distinguished speakers who found time to throw light on Afghan situation today, briefly, on a very complex issue. This goes to the credit of the organizers, and especially Mr. Yashodan, who has been very much busy with calling you and inviting you and getting your acceptance and all that. Afghanistan is an important country in Southeast Asia. We have relations with Afghanistan, historical relations with Afghanistan, right from the times of Aryans and in Aztec times, and they coming down straight to present day. We have always considered Afghans as our brothers and our sisters. And I don't think that we should take any take a matter of great obligation we have put on Afghans that we are helping them in times of distress. It's our new duty. This is the culture of India, to help the people suffering under man-made or nature-made calamities, irrespective of what their response is. We have had a very bad example in Turkey recently, but that's an eye-opener also. I have one important point to make. Somebody raised the question, what is the role of OIC in resolving Afghan issue? I was myself going to ask this question, and now I would myself answer that question. There are 53 Islamic countries in OIC, and I have been watching their activities, their summit conferences, their foreign secretaries conferences, and so forth and so on. And OIC has only one task to perform, that is to pass a resolution against India on Kashmir. That is the only job which OIC is doing. I have not heard a single member out of these 53 members raising the issue either of Afghans or of Uyghurs or of Balochs or of Pashtuns and so forth and so on. So I will very humbly conclude that they are all hypocrites. I have never seen any hypocrite, anybody more hypocrite than what they are, because I'll tell you why. I have myself in Geneva been asking these people, you go to the OIC and you just raise one resolution, pass one resolution on the behest of Pakistan against India on Kashmir? Why didn't you talk about other things? And they say, I'm telling you about some of the foreign ministers and representatives of policy countries whom I met, whom I talked to. They say, Professor, don't take us seriously. We do pass a resolution against India, but when we come out, we go straight to the embassy of India and we tell them, don't take this seriously. We are with you. We are your friends. So this is no importance to OIC whatsoever. It's the creation of Pakistan and nothing else, and befooling 52 countries, this one country. Similarly, Taliban are the creation of Pakistan. I don't have time to go into the history, but you know that Lieutenant General Babar, he is the man responsible for creating Taliban. They created Taliban for some political purpose, but things didn't go the way they liked. One more point briefly, I will address. I know that Taliban have not changed their treatment, their behavior towards women. But I ask a question. Have you seen recently what happened in Iran? 400 women have been killed. How do you consider, why don't you say that Iranians are more brutal than Afghans, Taliban? And what has been the condition of women in Saudi Arabia before Salman introduced reforms? So this is a balance in many Islamic countries. And I, as a student of Islamic history, must say that the conflict between the conservatives and the liberals, between the progressive and regressive elements throughout Islamic world have been going on right from the times of Ibn Sina, Abu Ali Sina. Sina was the first man who said that we must question, use logic, and use logic even in theology, he said. And he was then later on, the rulers of the time, he was condemned. He was given a very bad name. So this is the conflict going on. And in modern times, the Taliban, this whole region has been found as the simmering pot of radicalism. So everybody who has a negative approach tries to find friendship with this simmering pot of radicalism because it's their politics. And Afghanistan, unfortunately, Afghans have been drawn into the vortex of international politics where their interests get submerged. And I think Nahi has very rightly pointed out that Afghan, their traditions, their culture, their tribal rules. I do not agree with the proposition that democracy must be exported to Afghanistan. That's wrong. That's incorrect. Afghans, they are a tribal society. They have their own rules. What